So now I want to talk about using text as a whole, not just the typeface, but the how you would lay out, your paragraphs, your words, and your individual characters of your typeface. Okay, so spacing. So there are some things that we can do as far as the way that it should be laid out, right? So first, there's tracking. A lot of these again would be covered in like some of the DI classes and definitely in other courses as well. So tracking is the overall spacing of the letters. So this one's got a really large tracking, right? So like it's spaced out, and then this one's very small. So you can see basically it spreads the letters from each other. Kerning is more on an individual basis. So most of the time when you're typing out like in Word and stuff, it'll have auto kerning turn on. And what that means is if these two letters were monospace, although they're not, you can tell because that W is wider than this A is. But if they were, again, that typewriter scenario, there would be a kind of a larger gap here, because if this was a block, right, that was being placed, it would take up all this space, and then this one's a block, it would take up all this space, and you'd have this overly large gap where it wouldn't make the letters seem associated, and you might actually think it's like two separate words. What kerning will do, especially like auto kerning, is it will actually push the letters closer to each other to give it more of a cohesion, like you see here. So if you see the red line that's going in between, clearly they are actually overlapping, right? The two bounding boxes of them are going over top of each other. So sometimes you need to manually kern your stuff. This shouldn't be that big of an issue as far as what we're working with, but just be aware that these are terms that you use. Sometimes these are particularly important, so it's going to sound stupid, but I used to do embroidery, not like little kittens, like on hats and sweatshirts and stuff for my graphic design business. And we would use a typeface called closest point, because the stitching would stitch around the letter, go right. It has to start at one spot and then end at another spot. And then what it does is we'll do what we call a jump stitch, which means it would jump from here up to the W and then go. But then you'll see that big long line, okay, which isn't good. So you'd want to use a what we call closest point typeface. And what it would do is that stuff that was kerned well, such as this one here, it would go and then it would jump over to this smaller gap and go up and down. So you can see how kerning would be really important if you were doing stitching, because if it's too far apart, you're going to see the little threads. But if the letters are close enough together, you wouldn't even notice it. Word spacing is like tracking, but it's 4 words. And then, you can have more or less. Leading, which we can kind of apply by doing line height and with our CSS, is basically just the space from one line to the next line. So you can see this has more, this has less. And you can see I was able to basically do all these things just using HTML. This is all HTML. Took me a long time, believe it or not. So then there's alignment. So we have obviously left alignment, center alignment, and right alignment. Generally speaking, almost always keep it to the left. Very rarely do you want to do center. I mean, maybe if the heading of your page can be centered, but most of the time that is not something you want to use. You can use right alignment, but it's usually a little bit weird because it'll kind of feel like out of place, but that's an option. I don't even know if this one's going to work. That's partly why, see how this is going off? It's because I was trying to show an example of a widow and orphan. So a widow is when you have most often one word at the end of a paragraph on the last line. So these aren't even, I think this got cut off. An orphan is when you have a single word on top of a paragraph. So you can't see that either. Oh yeah, because look at, so here's paragraph is an orphan. So the idea is that you would only have like a little bit of text instead of like finishing a nice long line or having it go to about halfway. That would be a widow. The other option is that the orphan would be like if you have a line and then there's only like one word on the next paragraph and then the next paragraph starts, or in the next column and then the next paragraph starts. You generally want to just avoid those. It'll not look very good. This almost looks justified, doesn't it? Anyway, you don't want to do justified text either. It's not ADA compliant. Okay. So hopefully that all makes sense.